All right, sweet ride. How's everyone doing? If you're watching this now, you're watching the replay because no one's in by now. Anyway, I got a fun guest, one with a great laugh and a great sense of humor. I got the lovely Miriam Schwab from Strattic. Uh, Miriam, so let's before we'll get into the topic. First, why don't you tell us like a little bit about you? What's your story? Why you started a business? Just a little bit kind of about your background and how you got into Strattic. Maybe a short brief of Strattic first, and then tell us how we got there.
Okay, so I'm Miriam Schwab. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strattic. Strattic converts WordPress websites to static and headless architecture in one click, which is generally something that's really complicated to achieve. And by doing that, we make WordPress sites faster, more performant, basically unhackable and scalable. And you don't have to change how you do things. Regular WordPress, click of a button, and you get that type of output. So that's Strattic.
Well, wait,
Um,
what does that mean? A click of a button? Like, what does
like
this click of a button do? Like any
So
button?
you no, so we add a very special button to WordPress. So people, if you log into your WordPress admin, if you have a WordPress site, you're familiar with the WordPress admin. That's where you go in to edit content, add posts, whatever you do. So you do all of that, and then once you're finished making those changes, we add another button to the WP admin bar, which goes across the top, and you just click it, and then it deploys those changes to a static replica of the site. So the static replica looks and acts exactly the same as your original WordPress site, except for that it's kind of just like the front end chopped off of the back. So the WordPress engine, servers, all the stuff that actually can cause quite a mess and a lot of the pain and issues that WordPress users experience, it's all left behind. And the static version of the site is just, it's fast and secure and performant and reliable. And you don't have to throw away your existing site to get that. You don't have to redo anything, and you don't have to learn new tooling. You use WordPress as usual, and then you get that very modern, very reliable, very secure output. So that's
Awesome.
Strattic.
All right, so that's Strattic in short. So basically, for someone that doesn't understand this stuff, uh, how would you explain it? It basically, what people think is their actual website. They're not exactly looking at it directly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's people describe it in different ways. The static version of the site, it's like a snapshot, or in a way, it's like a mirror of it. But everything on it looks the same and acts the same as the original site. So if you have a bunch of pages in your navigation on your WordPress site, they're there. If you have forms, they're there and they work. And all the blog posts, they're all there. The pagination, it's all there. We also make sure to support things related to SEO. It's very important to us. So uh, um, if you're using a plugin like Yoast SEO, then your static version of your site will also have all your XML sitemaps, which are really important, and robust.txt and 301 redirects. We support those as well. You can manage those on WordPress as usual, and they get applied to the static version of the site. Oh, and another benefit of the static version of the site is that because it's fully static, unlike a regular WordPress site where the content pages on WordPress are not static files, they don't actually exist. When you
Well, why
view
don't
a
we take a
page
step
on a
back and
WordPress site,
why don't you explain
yeah,
what a static is for those that so
okay, yes.
so for those of us that aren't website dorks, why don't you explain what static is?
What did someone just call me recently? It wasn't a website dork, but it was something on that level, and it is
Uh-huh.
accurate.
It was yes.
So so static doesn't refer to the interactivity of the site. So it's actually a challenging term because people are like static. I don't want a static site. I want my site to be internet interactive and all that kind
Dynamic
of
or
stuff.
whatever.
So dynamic, and I want people to be able to like enjoy it. There should be images and videos and all this kind of stuff. And all that stuff exists on a static site. The static site means it refers to its architecture. So the architecture is a static architecture in that the pages aren't being generated for you on the fly as you request to view them, which is how it is on a regular WordPress site. And so that's called dynamic architecture. Static architecture is every page exists on its own, they're pre-rendered, and so nothing has to be generated on the fly for you, the user. All the work has been done already before you view the page, so it becomes available to you really quickly. And because of that, you can fully use a CDN, and then
What's
it's fast
that?
everywhere. So, oh yes, also a good question. Ethan, I am a internet dork or web dork, so it's like
Yes, this
not
is what
exactly
this is
below the
what
belt. It was
this is. It's in my was accurately below the belt. Thank you, Eitan. You have
yes,
greetings from
it's
Geneva
accurate.
from Smadar. Yes.
Hi,
Uh,
Smadar.
what's
Thanks for joining us.
CDA? What did you say? CDL site?
CDN. So right, yeah, no CDN, CDN. Um, a CDN is a content delivery network. And what that means is that so in the olden days, or in the current days, in many cases for WordPress sites, your WordPress site sits on a physical server somewhere, and that physical server is in a geographical location. So let's say it's in Texas, in the United States. That means that anyone who wants to view your site actually has to, their internet, whatever connection has to travel across the world. Let's say they're in Europe, cross oceans and whatever, and then get your information and then bring it back to the browser. So that can be slow. So the point of a content delivery network is that it creates replicas of your site in what is known as edge locations, as in it's like
Hmm.
locations around the world.
So it
So
doesn't have to travel that
that
far all
person,
the time. It
exactly,
kind of mirrors your site at a regular basis, so you can come in and so you don't have to travel all
yeah,
the way around the world. Okay,
good
got it.
description.
Miriam,
Okay,
you're in the
that's
future.
exactly right.
Is what I'm starting. I started to like you're in the future. All right, so we already got questions on the topic. So you got any questions? Let's start. Like, what makes a website suck or not suck? Which is a great question. But so let's talk about. I think we should talk about the two main topics, and then we can, if we want, we can get into conversion rate optimization, things like that. But so let's talk about secure, and then let's talk about speed. Actually, talk about speed first. I actually, as an advertiser, I care a lot about that. Even though we work with a lot of cybersecurity, we really care about secure. But let's do that too. All right. So secure. What makes a website secure, other than let's say using Strattic? But like, well, how would you define a secure website?
Someone just asked me, what is the most secure
Wait.
way to run WordPress? And I said, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear fine.
Okay, okay. I said, don't run WordPress at all. And what I mean is that when you're running a WordPress site, or a site that's based on the dynamic architecture that I described, it has many layers of potential vulnerabilities, from the operating system of your server up to the languages and databases that it uses to manage the content. So that's PHP, MySQL, and then WordPress itself. And then WordPress sites tend to have a lot of plugins, and at any given time, any of those plugins could potentially have a vulnerability. So keeping WordPress secure on all those levels is kind of like a cat and mouse game, and it's ongoing and never ending. So the best way to run WordPress is not to run it at all. And what I mean is our approach, which generates the static version of the site, that's what the internet views. That's the only version of the site that the internet can access. And that site has none of those layers of vulnerabilities. They're all left behind in the WordPress site. And that WordPress site is in a special environment that is not accessible to anyone unless they have permission. And it even shuts down when not in use for an additional layer of security. So that is the most secure way to run WordPress. But if you're not going the static route, then I'll just give some quick tips about like what you should do to your WordPress site to at least try to keep it secure. So first of all, make sure you don't have a user with the username admin. That comes default with WordPress, and hackerbots know it, and so they'll just try to ping away at your login page until they manage to maybe figure it out. So you don't even want that to be a thing.
Is
So
this
don't
when you
use
give us
admin.
a list of things to do, and each thing on the list we're like, okay, I'm guilty, guilty, guilty? Is this what's about to happen?
If you feel guilty, that's between you and yourself. You don't need to feel guilty. And no, you really don't, because you're actually like everyone else.
All
That's,
right,
yeah, it's very
that's
common.
even worse.
So no, that's why we created Strattic, because 41% of the internet now runs on WordPress, and like it's really hard to keep it secure. So I'll just give a few more tips, because
What's the
you
trend on that fact?
probably,
I'll be interrupting. You can interrupt too.
oh
Is
no.
that trending up or down, or is that
Up. It's crazy. WordPress grows something like 3% every year in terms of its market share, which is
whoa?
larger than the next largest platform's whole market share. So the next largest platform is Shopify, and it's less than 3%. So WordPress is growing 3% every year, and that's after people have been saying for a long time WordPress's days are over. I actually was in that camp for a bit as well. it's legacy, it's old school, it's time for something new. But what I've seen throughout my WordPress career, which has been quite long, I've been in the world of WordPress for like 15 years, is that new stuff comes along all the time. And then everyone goes, this is a new shiny thing. Goodbye, WordPress. And then they try the new shiny thing and it's lacking a lot of functionality, usability, extensibility, and tooling that WordPress has. And then people miss WordPress and they come back to it. And that's happening now, even with this modern trend of what's known as Jamstack and headless. I don't know if you guys have heard these terms, but
I can
developers are
pretend.
very excited about it, and for good reason. You can pretend, yeah, just like CDN. But it's very complicated to use and manage, and so people start with Jamstack and very often come back to WordPress, and we've seen that a lot at Strattic.
Okay, cool. So back to what makes your websites suck from a speed issue. Let's start there, right? So for those that don't know, you
Okay.
might think, okay, speed, right? We load a page, we're like, come on, load already. Okay, we get that. But from a marketer's perspective, uh, Google, other search engines, and even social media platforms now increasingly, they want to improve the user experience. So if they're going to click on and leave their platform to your website, they don't want them to be frustrated that they're sending you to a website that loads slowly. So both for SEO and for ads, as an example, search engines demand excellent speed time on desktop and mobile. They also demand security, which which maybe we'll get to. So what we need to be able to do is make sure our speed is fast, so we don't get penalized both on SEO and ads. Um, right. So that's the explainer. So what can people do to speed up the site? I mean, in general, right? So people talk a lot about shrinking images, and there's a lot you can do. What are some generic as a WordPress wizard? What are some generic tips you have for people using WordPress or other sites to speed it up? And then if you want, you can, yeah, I'd like to hear more.
Speed and performance is an ongoing battle. It's almost in many ways more painful than the security battle to some extent, because the security battle is it's pretty clear. But with performance, every site is built differently, and so the performance issues come from different places, which is very, very frustrating. So if you look online, you'll find tons of posts that go, here's how to speed up your site. And then they'll say, optimize images, use caching plugins. And all of that is true. Oh, minification. But I'll explain the challenge with all of them, which is not going to make anyone feel better about anything. So optimizing images is actually like a pretty easy win. You can't really go wrong with it. You, with your eyes, can see if an image is over optimized or not. Like that's the issue with optimizing images. You don't want it to lose the quality to the extent that it stops being a useful or beautiful image. So, but you can shrink it, and then that's great. Um, Minifying CSS and JavaScript, which means like when you write code, you have spaces in between, so it smushes everything together to get rid of the spaces, which are considered characters as well. But it often breaks things. So that's like hard. Caching. So WordPress has a lot of caching plugins that you can install. Some of them have pretty good out of the box default settings. So a very good caching plugin is WP Rocket. People have good results with it with the default settings. And the reason I'm emphasizing default settings is because when you look at any of these caching plugins, you'll see like a billion options. And then it's really complicated and confusing, and you can easily overcache. Overcache means you cache your site to the point where if you make updates to your site, it doesn't get published and people can't see it, which is very frustrating. And if you undercache, then you lose the benefit of caching. So that's really challenging. I think that one of the best things that people can do to speed up their site is to choose a high quality hosting provider, because that already will make a difference. Like some of what can slow down a site is like load on other pages on your site, or if you're like on a lower tier of hosting, you're on shared hosting, and so if other sites are getting load, that will impact your site as well. So and you can try to use a CDN, but CDNs can only be partially used on regular WordPress. So I'm sorry that I don't have like great news or like a one trick pony type thing here, but it's a very frustrating thing. Oh, and I'm sure all of you have run your sites through Google PageSpeed Insights or Lighthouse, and there's always remove render blocking JavaScript. Okay, no human being can remove render blocking JavaScript. Like you need a developer, and it often can demand quite a bit of work to restructure your page so that stuff loads in a better order. And yeah, it's really frustrating. And Google's going to be rolling out their Core Web Vitals update soon. It's supposed to be mid-June, so let's say next week or something, and we'll see what that means for
Yeah.
everyone. But in the meantime, I feel like the internet's freaking out over it, which is
It's probably just your
in
circle
my opinion.
that's freaking out.
Maybe.
We're
I don't
all in
know.
our
Yeah, it
world.
could be.
Anyway, a LinkedIn user, I think it was Ayala, said good explanation on CDNs. We're going to get back to
Oh,
what your
thank you.
website sucks and doesn't suck. That will be a recurring fee. Dan says, what about in session pop-ups and self-promoting banners that take it
Oh,
over your screen? Yeah, I think I think
no,
Dan needed to get something off his chest, which I thank you for you're
I,
speaking for us all,
Dan, are you
though. I
talking about
appreciate it.
someone specifically?
Is it
Yeah.
right? Like
No, it's
today?
terrible.
They don't still do
Yeah,
that, do they?
no, so a lot of media sites, unfortunately, still do, especially in Israel, they still do that. But they're going to be penalized. That's, I guess, the good thing about the Core Web Vitals. The Core Web Vitals is looking for things that happen on the screen. It's called a cumulative layout shift. Like, does the screen look one way and then shift another way? Which is what happens with pop-ups, right? Like the screen loads and then suddenly there's something else happening on the screen. And Google no likey. So sites are going to have to stop doing that and figure out other ways to spam us and whatever. But that's not going to go over well. And so yes, that sucks. Dan, you are correct.
What about exit pop-up when you're about to exit the page and they have a pop-up? What's up with that? Is that going to be also? Because that's commonly used in B2B companies, tech companies,
Yeah,
and actually to good
right.
success often. So
Totally. So with the pop-up ads on the exit, it's one of those things where it's always like it's an annoying thing, but it's effective. And
yeah.
I don't think it's too intrusive in general. Like I don't love it, but I just click